Hello, and welcome to this presentation about my efforts to grow native plants for community projects. My name is Jean Suplick, and I'm a Texas Master Naturalist with the Blackland Prairie chapter here in Collin County. I originally gave this presentation live at our March 2026 chapter meeting, but have recorded it for those who might have missed the meeting. Most of you here are Texas Master Naturalists. You know that native plants matter. You understand habitat. You've spent a chunk of your training time learning to identify plants, understanding pollinator relationships, and basically building ecological literacy. I hope this story resonates with you for two reasons. First, because it's about what happens when a modest conservation goal collides with biological enthusiasm and seed packet optimism. And second, because it's about what happens when one person's accidental overstock becomes a community asset. My first grow out adventure was on a project that Carol Clark, a master naturalist from our chapter, kicked off in late 2021. I eagerly signed up to start about 30 green milkweeds from seed, and somehow I wound up with 70. Yes, 70. Lesson number one, nothing inflates your ego like a ridiculous propagation rate. By late April, the baby plants needed homes in the ground for the summer, so with Carol's okay, congratulations, class of 2022. I hope you were able to give those plants a nice home, and I hope they're still growing strong for you. Now, confidence can take you to some very surprising places. The personal gratification that I felt from the 2022 milkweed grow out got me thinking, why not put this endeavor on repeat for the class of 2023? That's it. They'll receive diploma plants too. And off I went, but this time, instead of growing milkweeds, I would try my hand at other native plants. For the 2023 grow out, I got my seed stash from the native plants in my own garden that generously donated their offspring. I mixed some black clay soil that was left over from a sprinkler repair with some leftover raised bed mix. I grabbed every lonely little pot I could find, and I sowed seeds in October of 2022. They were left to germinate outside, and their little seedlings lived outside unless a winter storm threw a tantrum. And yes, I did slip them the occasional fertilizer bribe. In spring, their new homes included our 2023 class graduates, and since there were some leftovers, a Girl Scout pollinator project was able to take on the rest of the plants. Nothing breeds success like success, or at least that was the theory behind my 2024 grow out experience. More species? Obviously. More plants? Absolutely. So what that translated to was it was time to start using space better and dial down the chaos. The best part, though, was that I gained a full partner in the grow out enterprise, my beloved husband, Michael. I call him a freelance naturalist. He doesn't earn any volunteer hours or collect pins like the rest of us master naturalists, but he's terrifically generous with his time and his many talents. More efficient space management came from using uniform 2-inch starter pots. And bagged seed mix reduced the potential for disease to get a foothold. When the weather turned ugly one winter day, we swooped in like a tiny plant rescue squad, grabbed all the trays from outside and whisked them indoors to a cozy makeshift warming station, grow lights and all, so the seedlings wouldn't miss a beat. The majority of these plants made it into the hands of the 2024 graduating class. The rest were spread out across several community engagement events and speaking opportunities. By the fall of 2024, it was time to start taking the whole operation more seriously. The goal was to bump up propagation rates and have the little plants ready for life in the ground by mid-April, with root systems stout enough to get a head start on their first North Texas summer. My mostly accurate and dubiously complete notes from the 2024 grow out gave me a pretty respectable launching pad. And the workshop, formerly known as the garage, was quietly rebranded as, with Michael's blessing, as a greenhouse. Remember the more species, more plants mantra? Yeah, the only way to pull that off was to go vertical. 2 baker's racks on casters, plus 6 grow lights sized to fit, and a couple of fans to circulate air. It's amazing the quality of affordable equipment suited to small greenhouses you can find these days now that more folks are growing cannabis at home. Okay, so now let's take a step back and let me give you a quick recap on how the 2025 grow out actually played out. The whole adventure begins with a humble seed. If you have plant-loving friends, you'll never run out of seeds. Plant people are notorious seed swappers, practically professional enablers. I'm grateful to every one of you who shared a few of your treasures with me. So fellow seed collectors, keep a pencil handy. It really helps to know the provenance of seeds. Where did the mother plant grow? Which county? Which patch of ground? When were the seeds harvested? Month and year are both helpful, and the fresher is usually the better. And once you've got the seeds in your care, be sure to treat them with a little respect. Seeds may be small, but they're full of plans for the future, so it's worth reading up on how best to store them. In nature, seeds spend winter in cold, moist conditions that prepare them to sprout. This cold stratification, as it's called, breaks dormancy by softening seed coats and dissipating germination-inhibiting hormones. Now, the capriciousness of North Texas winter weather has a very strong impact on which plant species will germinate well in any given year. If a gardener wants the best possible germination rates every year, what do? Well, we try to outsmart Mother Nature, of course. We have things at our disposal like calendars, refrigerators, coffee filters, baggies, lots of things to help control moist stratification indoors. So what could go wrong? Well, I can tell you with confidence that getting sucked down the data rabbit hole is the first thing. Ag extension agencies and horticulturalists in the prairie states all have something to say about cold stratification, and often their advice differs a bit. It can be very frustrating trying to reconcile data from several sources, even very authoritative ones. At the end of the day, all I can say is you have to use trusted sources from as close to home as possible. I usually consult the Native Plant Society of Texas's online plant database and also the wildflower.org website that's run by the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. But just beware, even with those resources, you can get incomplete and competing information. And then there's YouTube, naturally. It is a terrific resource of how-to videos on countless subjects, cold, moist stratification included. The real question is, how many of them can a sane person watch back to back? I suspect there may not be an upper limit. However, once I had wrapped up my YouTube schooling, I did land on the moist coffee filter method. With a spray bottle, you dampen a coffee filter, you scatter seeds on it, and then fold it into a neat little packet. Because these little packets are flat, they stack very nicely into a plastic container that you can tuck easily into the back of the fridge. So after my interpretation of the recommended number of days, I took the seeds out of the refrigerator and sowed them immediately. You don't want to let them dry out. Here's the thing. I suspect that cold stratification boosted germination, but I don't have the hard data to back that up. It's tough to draw firm conclusions when you haven't set up a proper experiment, which I didn't, at least in 2025, or for the 2026 grow out, but it's on my list for 2027. Once the seeds were cold stratified, now the real fun began. It was time to get my hands dirty. I started the seeds in these tidy little 2-inch pots and filled them with a light, fluffy, moisture-retentive mix so that the baby plants didn't shrivel up and were easy to tease apart for transplanting later. The seed starting mix came bagged, and once it had been used, it went straight into the compost. I invested in good quality pots and trays in 2024, and they are still holding up beautifully. They're generously perforated for drainage, and the trays are sturdy instead of doing that twist and crack drama that most nursery trays do. They have 2 superpowers. They make bottom watering simple, and they use space efficiently. 15 pots per tray, 6 trays per rack, a baker's rack shelf, and not a sliver of space was wasted. Once the seedlings had 1 or 2 sets of true leaves, it was time to move them into a larger, more nutritious home. 4.5-inch pots make a very comfortable starter home, at least for a while. They hold quite a bit more soil than the typical 4-inch nursery pot, which matters since most of these plants will live in these pots well into April. I filled them with a bagged potting mix called Happy Frog potting soil, which you can get at lots of outlets around town. And besides that, who couldn't love a soil with a cheerful name like that? It has all the nutrients the little plants need to get big and strong. I kept the transplants indoors under lights just so I could be assured they survived the transplanting process itself, but also had a chance to grow a few more true leaves. Then they got booted out of the greenhouse into the real sunlight, North Texas temperatures within reason, and those changeable spring winds we experience. That way, they weren't shocked when it was finally time to be planted in the ground. Just like with the seed pots, I bought some quality trays that facilitate bottom watering and withstand hikes back and forth between the nursery and the greenhouse when the weather turns. 15 pots fit neatly into 1 tray, 3 trays fit perfectly onto a baker's rack shelf. So that was the process. Now let's talk about some realities. Note to self, take more notes. I was absolutely sure I was taking stellar notes last year, but in a greenhouse and a nursery at peak chaos, it's all hands on deck, none left over to hold a pen and calmly record what's going on with 25 different plant species every other day. I know what some of you are thinking. Just use electronics, Jean, really? Well, cameras count, right? I'm good at that. I'm actually pretty decent with Excel, and I type way faster than I write. Unfortunately, greenhouses and nurseries are basically war zones for laptops. Think water pitchers, messy, messy hands. You get the idea. End result, plenty of potholes in my note-taking. And what's the problem with that? Well, the moment you really need one crucial detail from last year's grow out, that's exactly the note that's pulled a disappearing act. So every year, I endeavor and strive to get better. Fungus gnats. Tiny and annoying and secretly chewing on the little seedlings' roots. Their larvae live in the top couple of inches of moist soil, feasting on fungi and decaying matter, which is fine. But when their numbers burgeon, they start on the tender roots of your new seedlings. So here's the trick. You can buy these yellow sticky traps to keep the number of adults down. And for the larvae, there's a product called mosquito bits. The form I use comes in a bag of small nuggets that are inoculated with an unpronounceable bacterium. But I will give it a try. BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis. It's a natural occurring bacterial insecticide. It targets certain fly larvae, including fungus gnats and mosquitoes. while staying safe for people, pets, birds, fish, and most other insects, pollinators included. I mix the bits with water and then apply that to the surface of the pots, and it works great. Another lesson I learned was very colorful. Some seedlings tried on a new look, yellow leaves with green veins, courtesy of living too long in an iron-free seed mix instead of a proper potting mix full of nutrients. My bad. Others sported these beautiful purple cotyledons, classic phosphorus deficiency, as I learned in Heather Fell's deep dive about a month ago. That might explain why the 10-petal anemones that were growing at a glacial speed. Just a small hit of water-soluble fertilizer woke them up, thank goodness. Meanwhile, algae moved onto the pot surfaces in the warm, moist greenhouse environment. It may be green algae, it may be blue-green, I'm not sure. Maybe someone with a better biology education than mine could tell the difference. But the algae was a quiet, well-behaved tenant, causing no discernible trouble at all. Few things test a gardener's patience more than the larger backyard opportunists, squirrels and cottontails. Squirrels sometimes seem to lose the plot and dig for buried treasure in pots where there isn't a single nut. They particularly have a special fondness for 1-gallon containers. Plant roots do not like that. Cottontails, well, you know how the story goes. You stroll through the back garden before sundown admiring your handiwork, and you wake up to find plants nibbled down to the ground. Very disappointing. Our solution was to press Michael's giant vegetable cage into service. It sits atop our raised vegetable beds. Sure, we have to forgo having a lettuce and a spinach crop in the spring, but it feels like a fair trade for keeping the critters away. There are other ways to deter rabbits. I really like the one that fellow Master Naturalist Paulette Platko uses. It works very well against cottontails. Its key benefit, it's very easy to reconfigure on the fly as needed, including expanding around an ever-growing nursery. Winter in North Texas always seems to have a few tricks up its sleeve. If you're running a nursery, even a modest one like ours, you end up watching the forecast like it's a suspense movie, especially when freezing temperatures threaten. Little plants in pots are extra vulnerable, with their roots exposed on all 4 sides to the cold air instead of being tucked safely into the ground. When a freeze is in the cards, the questions start. How low will it go? For how long? And will anything icy be falling from the sky? In the end, it all comes down to judgment calls. But since the whole point of a project like this is to grow as many plants as we possibly can, we tend to play it safe and call for a forced march back to the greenhouse sooner rather than later. Every so often in spring, we get some impressively strong winds. They can shove your pots around with very little warning. Taller plants like these Maximilian sunflowers on the left have a higher center of gravity, especially when the soil in the pot has dried out. So one good gust can tip them over and send them tumbling across the yard. Then there are plants like the partridge peas on the right, which evolved to grow in the prairies, casually leaning against their grassy neighbors for support. Without that backup, a single gust can snap their stems. We tried staking them, and that did help quite a bit. What really made a difference, though, it was giving them some shelter. We ended up tucking all the 1-gallon pots together under our pergola with the tall ones closest to the house, and that worked pretty well. So here's how the 2025 grow out tallied up. I sowed 24 native species into 267 little seed starting pots. Of those, 176 pots cooperated by germinating, giving me a grand total of about 450 little plants. The seedlings were transplanted into 4.5-inch pots. A few didn't survive the transplanting. On the other hand, some of the transplants showed so much enthusiasm they had to be promoted to 1-gallon accommodations. Using the 2025 commercial native plant prices that I could find as a guide, I estimated the total value of the plants from the grow out to be $2,544. The very, very best part of this project, then and now, is teaming up with my fellow Master Naturalists to find good homes for these plants. Here are the folks who received plants last year. I want you all to know that I'm genuinely awed by what you and your volunteers do for the community, and I'm so glad to get to chip in by sharing free plants with you. And we can't forget why this whole thing started in the beginning, and that was to support our newest class of graduates with plants to kickstart their own native gardens. So, class of 2026, I look forward to seeing you at graduation in May, standing alongside our ever-growing ranks of plant donors. You will not go home empty-handed. The 2026 grow out is in full swing. About 240 plants are in the nursery. 45 more are along the back walkway in our yard, and roughly 100 are in the greenhouse waiting for their outdoor debut. I've been trialing some new species and trying different cold stratifying methods like damp vermiculite or sand. But I agree with Heather Fell. They don't work all that well for all seed sizes, and they're messy. So from now on, I'm sticking with using the coffee filter method. It is shaping up to be another strong year for supplying plants to chapter projects. I've already delivered some to Cheryl Lynn Dillon's Chestnut Square Historic Village Garden in McKinney and Laura Kuyama's Monarch View project in Frisco. The rest are being distributed over the next few weeks, so stay tuned. But best of all, the board of our chapter backed the 2026 grow out based on the 2025 results and awarded a micro grant to cover consumables. So thank you very much, Blackland Prairie chapter. So far, it looks like money was well spent, but we'll know in a month. And with that, I'll wrap up by saying thank you for watching this presentation and happy growing.